Hello, everybody. So our next presentation is going to be interesting, to say the least. It's not your average medical conference type of presentation. We're going to bring up two new friends of ours who have quickly become family. We have Dr. Danuel Snelgrove from South Carolina and Dr. Patrick Brown from Ohio, who are going to talk about stealing hope from our patients. And these two physicians...
Just let them talk.
These two physicians understand what it is to have hope stolen from them. They both have lived with epilepsy themselves and have overcome all of their challenges to become professionals and medical doctors. So without any delay, Dr. Snelgrove and Dr. Patrick Brown.
Both days I've gone and gotten my plate and then just run out of that room as fast as I can and eaten at my little two purple chairs area because I'm just, I'm like, I don't want to sit and eat with the doctors. You know, like, I don't know, So yeah, I think we're just people, we've both been patients in different ways, and I think we've been able to connect. I was here last year. This year, Brad and Candy helped me out. I had a little two purple chairs. Ask Dr. Brown, and I've gotten to see so many people and meet so many friends, and it's been like delightful just to sit in these purple chairs and just see what happens, like who's going to walk by, like what question they have to ask, but it really like what story they have to tell, and then how are we going to connect? Because I bet, over 50 or 100 folks we've connected in some way, big or small. And you realize, I don't know, hopefully you guys have gotten to connect with people here or back at home, and you realize like our stories are so similar in so many ways. Like even if we've traveled like different journeys, that we've all felt like really alone living with epilepsy. I don't know, have you?
Oh, yeah.
It's just me?
No. Okay.
Is it not? It's not just me, right? Yeah, and so I think, and I'll pass the mic in a second, but one thing that if I had to say like one thing, you're like, okay, what did that guy say? I don't remember. Like, don't go through this stuff alone, because epilepsy can be just such a lonely slog. And I remember I had my first seizure, I was 17, and I was just thinking about it this morning. I don't think I talked or like knew another person, like actually knew another person with epilepsy for like 15 years. Right, and I was like a child neurology resident at Texas Children's, and I was around neurologists and around people with epilepsy, but like really knew somebody in a way where I was like kind of vulnerable and open and connected. And so my story, so don't go through this alone. I would say like find a friend or let yourself be found if you can. So after about 12 or so years, I was working as a pediatric epilepsy doctor, and someone came and knocked on my door, and it was a colleague of mine, and they said, hey, can I come in? The director told me that you have epilepsy, like you've got juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, and I was like, oh gosh, like what's going to happen now? And then they said a couple things that sort of changed my life. They said, I do too, like so do I. And I thought, well, here's another doctor, like with the same epilepsy type that I have, and that person's turned out to be like one of my closest friends. And just knowing that I wasn't alone was such a life-changing thing. And so let yourself be found, find a friend. Be a friend if you get a chance to sort of be that person that knocks on the door. Am I talking too much? Do you want the mic yet?
No, you're beautiful. Listen.
So I've gotten to meet so many people here. I don't know if Thelina yesterday, and she was telling a story about how she had developed epilepsy in her 30s and went to an epilepsy conference, maybe like a room like this, and she had a seizure. I was so embarrassed. She was so embarrassed. And she left the room And afterwards, she was getting ready to leave, and a woman came up to her and said, "Hey, do you have a second? Would you like to talk? I'd like to talk to you." She introduced herself. I guess they exchanged numbers. And Thelina had like a really dark period of time after that. And she got a phone call from this woman who said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm just checking up on you." And then she got another phone call from this woman. And then she would reach out and call her. And I think, just that relationship, just one person, like that's really all it takes was enough to be maybe life-saving or life-changing for her. So maybe, maybe you're that person that could say, hey, I was thinking about it today, and I thought, like, what if that woman wouldn't have had, like, the courage to just say, like, "Hey, do you have a second?" So maybe that's you. Like, maybe that's something that you could do. What else? That's a bit. Like, don't be alone. Like, find a friend, be found. Like, be a friend. And then I guess this is my last thing, and I'll shut up. But I don't know who's from California here. I'm from North Carolina. It's the South Carolina guy. I don't know how you got us here. But I don't know much about LA, and so Candy was like, "Why are you staying up in Malibu?" Like, I end up there somehow. But there's a place called Neptune's Net. It's like a great biker bar seafood joint. And so whenever I come to California, like that's the first place I feel like I have to go. And I went there a couple days ago, and there was this biker gang. They were awesome, man. They had like the leather jackets. They were so rough looking. They had like pistols on their jackets, like '07, like I don't know what, tats everywhere, like more than Drew. Can you show them what you've got, tat-wise? Yeah. But so these guys, and I was trying to I didn't want to go into their circle, like they were standing in a circle, and I'm like, they might like hurt me if I try to intrude. Because in the South, we talk to anybody, so we'd be like, "Hey, guys," But I was standing behind two of them in line, and this one guy had his beer, and he like cracked the top off the beer. I thought he just did it barehanded, like he was that like badass. But it was like he had a Leatherman tool, and then he cheers his buddy, and I saw like that solidarity there, and I was like, man, I kind of want some of that. Like that's amazing. And then you see these guys standing in their circle, and they're riding in a gang together, and it just made me think like, all right, we don't have like the great like leather jackets here. Like I don't know if Snell here could. Yeah, we got the purple though, right? So I feel like if you get a chance, and you don't have to do it all the time, but maybe like here once a year or a couple things locally, like ride with the gang. Let yourself kind of like do stuff like this, and don't be alone in there, because sometimes you can come to stuff like this and feel really alone because you're like, well, everyone else seems like they kind of know people and they're doing stuff, but like just don't leave this room alone, like because you got a bunch of people from North Carolina and South Carolina, and we'll talk to anybody. So like, don't leave this room like feeling alone with your epilepsy. We've sort of lived with epilepsy for a long time in different ways. And just be like, "Hey guys, like talk to us, give us your number, we'll get yours, like we'll be your friends." That's easy. And so don't leave this place alone. So that's it. Find a friend, let yourself be found, be a friend, and ride in a gang. And that's really all I've got to say. Yeah.
All right, so I guess I always like to kind of give my origin story. Because I joked when we first came in that I'm like an anti-doctor because if I cuss at any point, I apologize, but I absolutely hated doctors. My mom and dad are back there, and they can nod and attest to that. And part of that was, so I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 12 years old. I had mono for a few weeks, just wasn't feeling right, and then over a period of months, I'd been kind of telling my parents, "Hey, like, I'm 12, so obviously I'm not great at articulating things. Like, I kept feeling like I was choking in my sleep at night." Lo and behold, finally the one night finally comes where my family hears me crashing out of the bed. I'd fallen on a lava lamp in my room, cut my back all up, and I was having a full-on generalized tonic-clonic seizure. My mom got me in with a neurologist in the community, put me on phenobarbital, 12-year-old kid, and was like, "We'll see you in 6 months." And fortunately, I had parents that were like, "Well, that certainly isn't going to be the answer." And they got me to the Medical University of South Carolina, where today I am a neurologist and neurointensivist. the one thing I will say, because like so much, and I've talked with Brad and Candy about this, like epilepsy from the jump, like steals something from you, right? And it's like you feel very hopeless when you're diagnosed with it. And like looking back on it, I was 12 years old. I probably didn't fully understand what hopelessness meant, but I looking back, I'm like, yeah, I felt hopeless. And the reason why I felt that way, I'll tell you. So the day I'm at the pediatric neurologist's office, he's looking at a video that I think my mom and dad had recorded of the event that had happened. And he comes back in the room and he was like, just want to let you guys know, obviously, you know, Daniel has, this is before I went by Daniel has epilepsy. You know, I'm a 12-year-old kid. I had really bad ADHD. I'm like bouncing off the walls, looking around like I don't give a hell. I hope my parents take me to get some seafood after this. Like, and he looks at me and he's like, you know, Daniel, I just want you to know there is nothing in this world that you can't accomplish. And that's like a beautiful thing, right? He's telling me this, what I don't know is going to be a life-altering diagnosis. And then he catches himself. He goes, actually, you know, being fully transparent, like, about the only thing I can think that you can't do is fly an airplane. And I looked at my mom and dad, and he didn't know this. All I had ever wanted to do in my life, I was convinced I was going to go to the United States Naval Academy and be a Top Gun pilot. I was obsessed with flying planes of it. Like, that was what the goal was. And if I wasn't smart enough to get in the Naval Academy, it was going to be all right because I was going to be a professional basketball player. So, like, I had everything figured out, right? Like, I was 12 years old. I knew exactly what the hell I was going to do. And this guy just wrecked it in, like, 5 seconds, right? But I think the most important thing, though, was, like, kind of like what you said is, you know, now looking back on that, being diagnosed with epilepsy, and I've been seizure-free. I ended up having brain surgery in 2003 when I was 17. My seizures got really progressive. I actually had to withdraw from school, and I had a mother that went like scorched earth on anyone that could listen about this cannot be what my child's life is going to be. I had a vagus nerve stimulator. I mean, I was on all the meds, you name them, through 2002. I'd been on literally every single one. And so it's, you know, just looking back at all that, I was fortunate because I had a gang. I had my parents, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother who went on all the trips, and I would threaten to like throw her out of my mom's Suburban as we're driving down to the University of Miami or up to Henry Ford Medical Center because my mom hounded a neuroradiologist about getting a post-ictal SPECT scan, you know, like all these things, right?
As moms do.
Yeah, right. But I think the thing that I realized very early on, though, is like, and this translates to like my practice today, is the importance of giving people hope. So I deal with it all the time in the neuro ICU of being in a gray world, right? I see people with the most horrendous forms of status epilepticus. I had several bouts of status when I was a young man, but I never ended up with a breathing tube in and in an ICU, right? I see people with really bad brain injuries, but we can get people through a lot of things, right? Like science has come so far, but it can only take you so far without hope. Hope is what fuels resiliency. And to me, that's the superpower of epilepsy because it's not a lesson we necessarily want to have. We didn't ask for like an extra test in life to be, you know, thrown at us, right? But, you know, and you might have to go about things the long way. You're probably a much smarter guy than me. You don't even want to know how many times I had to take the MCAT to get into med school. And I remember being so discouraged and my dad saying, son, like, you're going to beat on that mother effort until they let you in. You know, he didn't allow me to have a backup plan. So I think the most important thing, sure, I couldn't be a naval aviator, right? Like, okay, that's fine. But the people that surrounded with me, I'm only at where I'm at in life because they gave me hope and they made me realize, like, no, you're going to get through this and, you know, you're going to have a life that's worth living. Just because you have epilepsy doesn't mean that, like, life isn't worth living and, you know, that, you know, there's this whole perceived thing, like, we got to be in the shadows and we shouldn't talk about it. But there's more of us, and I say us, people with epilepsy, than all the other sexy diagnoses in the neuro world outside of Alzheimer's, right? Parkinson's disease, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, a host of others combined are still not as many people in the United States that have epilepsy. Think about that. But it's not sexy, right? It doesn't. We haven't been fortunate enough for, like, I don't know, a politician or, I don't know, someone that quote unquote matters to bring awareness to epilepsy.
We're here to make epilepsy sexy. I don't know, that was the title of the talk.
Could that be next year's title for the talk?
I don't know if you guys know, like, so the rest of this time we're going to spend on...
Yeah, right. But you know what I mean, though, right? It's like it's such a shitty thing, for how it's like treated and how it's viewed. I mean, you know, being a teenager and told you have epilepsy, and then it's like, all right, well, now I'm seizure free for 6 months. I can drive. Well, try selling that to your friend's parents down the road, right? Like, hey, I haven't had a seizure in 6 months, but I can drive. Okay, like, it gets isolating really quick, you know, and it's tough. But in the long run, nobody wants to hear this, right? Again, it teaches you resiliency. Like, in spite of that, despite that, you're still going to go on. Life's still going to go on. You just got to figure out a way to still achieve what you want to achieve. And you can, and you should. And the hell to anybody that tells you you can't do it, because that's just horseshit. Sorry to cuss again, but yeah, sorry. Anyways, I'll stop rambling now.
No, that's amazing. Like I just hang out with this guy. It's like, you know, like you just meet people and you know, you never know who you're going to meet who may change your life or change your perspective, or if nothing else, you just get a little bit like, yeah, like I got that. And even if, now here's the thing for some of us, so I have like juvenile myoclonic epilepsy. Like my story is not as sexy, right, as yours. You can feel like, why don't I just sort of like took the meds and the meds kind of worked, and like what's my problem, you know, like why am I still feeling like alone in this thing? And I think kind of have to go back to like my motorcycle gang. Like we're all riding like different bikes, you know, like your bike is sexy as yours, like a big old like just monster, you know, thing, and maybe mine's like puttering along, but we're all in the same gang. And I think
that's the superpower of epilepsy.
yeah, and I think
we're all in it together. The journey is different, but you're still facing the same BS that everybody else that's been diagnosed with epilepsy has to face.
I think, and one of the things too, and hopefully here you could see it. I didn't see it when I was a teenager for sure, and I just sort of was like dumb. Like I had a seizure. They're like, don't drive for 6 months, and then I was like, but I got to drive to school. So after a couple of weeks, I was like, I want to drive to school, and then I got my first job that summer as a lifeguard. Like, yeah, I mean, it's like so ridiculous that like the doctor didn't even think like, oh, you probably shouldn't be a lifeguard, you know, like a couple months. And so, you know, so there's so much sort of stupid, you know, stuff. But I think I didn't have like, if I was 17 or so and you're like, hey, what does it look like to have epilepsy? Like, what does that look like? I've met so many amazing people here where I was like, if I knew like epilepsy looked like you, like I've heard your story and I've talked with you and it's amazing. If I knew like, oh, okay, so I could go to school in Indiana and be doing all these like wonderful things, and like how inspiring would I be? Or if I knew like epilepsy looked like this guy, you know, or like that goofy guy back there, the rock star with the cool hat on, or if I knew it looked like, if I knew that, like how much hope could I have? And so, right, and how much would I feel like, oh, I can do that? Like, why not? Like, what couldn't I do? Like, what's not possible?
Yeah, and I was going to say, so I'm glad you said that, because, so that's my buddy Drew Dixon back there. Everybody wave to Drew. So, he was a church basketball playground legend back in the day. But Drew and I became friends really in high school, just the same kind of close-knit network, and we both were, like, we loved basketball, right? That was our passion. Like I said, I was a delusional 6'1" white kid from Columbia, South Carolina, but I was going to go play in the NBA one day. Drew, on the other hand, was a nice 6'6" or 7". How tall are you, Drew? Yeah,
Round up.
But the reason why I bring this up, he was well aware of my struggles with epilepsy. It was kind of, and I'm sorry, I'm that guy now. Now my phone's ringing. he was well aware of it because my story was so different and severe, right? But I went through my whole childhood, and as I've gotten older, like I had no idea that Drew had epilepsy. One of my best friends, I had no idea that he had epilepsy. And how crazy is that? It's because you're conditioned to think and be embarrassed by the fact that you have epilepsy. On the flip side of that, I've always been, my mother back there, like, would relentlessly drive me around when I was 12, 13 years old to go share my story. Again, not the story that I wanted, so you can imagine how happy I was about it, to medical students, to coming to things like this in South Carolina, just to show, like, hey, this is what the face of epilepsy is, right? Like, and the face is different. Everybody else is different, but a lot of us are otherwise normal-looking, appearing people, right? We just happen to have epilepsy.
We can sing, we can dance.
Yeah, like we could do all the other things that we might have to think about things a little bit differently. We might have to get to where we want to go a little bit differently, but it doesn't change us, right? But so Drew, as we've gotten older, we got really close in college, and I realized, oh, okay, we started talking. I was trying to go to med school, and it's like, he called me because he had a seizure, and he's like, yeah, I've had seizures since I was 14. I was like, what?
Where you been, Drew?
How the hell did I not know this, So everybody's journey is different. And now he's a musician in Nashville, chasing his dream. And like he said, we had our first event, so we put together this thing called Electric Minds. We don't know what the hell we're doing. We've talked to a lot of y'all, I think, already today or yesterday too. So the idea being, we want to bring awareness and advocate for people with epilepsy. And just in our state back home in South Carolina, just like a lot of other states, there's not shit out there. There's not a unified effort. You're very marginalized. And there's these small groups of organizations, but nobody's doing anything to really like make noise. And we want to make some noise with music events and get people in the doors and show them, hey, we're actually here because we care about this cause that epilepsy that actually affects more people than Parkinson's and cerebral palsy. And not to minimize that, but it's like, that's kind of like a reality check, I feel like, for a lot of people, And so our goal eventually is we want to bring, so much of what you're taught with epilepsy is like your limitations, right? What you can do, what you can't do. And you're kind of left to just figure it out after that. And what we hope to do is inspire kids. Well, look, like he found his love and his passion through the arts, right? And what if we gave a kid a paintbrush, gave someone that's a good writer in school a pen and a paper and, hey, like let's write some poetry. We want to just create a space, create events in our community where kids can learn about the arts, they can learn instruments, and we don't know how the hell we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. We're going to figure it out as we go, right? But I think that's like part of life. You just got to figure it out as you go, and that's something that epilepsy teaches you because it's not perfect. It's not sexy. It's like leather, like your song, Drew, right? It gets lots of cracks in it, scuffs in it, and everybody's pieces of leather looks different than someone else's pieces of leather, right? And no piece of leather looks the same. And I think that's like very parallel to having epilepsy. Sorry, that started raining on.
I'm preaching. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes if you're in a kind of a group like this, a thing can happen. I don't know if it's happened for you guys, but it sort of happened to me over the last couple of days where or people have gone to like epilepsy camp when they're kids. It's sort of like you enter the little bit of like a alternate universe where you almost forget, and it feels like everyone in the world has epilepsy, and it's weird like not to, and it feels like good for a second. You kind of forget like there's is it James the recorder guy is amazing. I don't know if you've heard him play. He knows he can play everything. And so I was talking with him last night, and he's telling me about like what he does here, and he was like apologizing. He's like, I don't have epilepsy. Sorry, I'm an autism advocate. And I was like, no, dude, you can ride with us too. Like, like we're not like that. Yeah, get in the gang. But like, yeah, we're very accepting. But so you can feel that way, and it's such a like opposite way of how life typically feels. Like I remember the first time I kind of felt like that was at an epilepsy camp in I trained down in Houston, and so there was an epilepsy camp called Camp Spike and Wave, which is like a cute name, if you know. Yeah. But anyway, so I went there, and it was the younger camp, so it was like maybe younger elementary school kids. And I asked them, I was like, if anybody, like, let's say you were in your classroom at school and your teacher asked you to raise your hand if you had epilepsy, like, who here would raise their hand? And they were like, no. And I said, well, how about here? Like, if you have epilepsy, would you raise your hand? And they were all like, and then I raised my hand too, and they were like, what? And so we started sharing our stories a little bit. And these were like the little kids. And so, of course, they started trying to like one-up each other. They were like, one time I had a seizure at the bus stop, and then the next one was like, I have 4 seizures in PE, and they need diastat. But like, we were there, and we were at the camp, not to really just talk about epilepsy. Like, that's sort of just like, the playing field. But we were there to play kickball, right? Like, it was fun because we were all like, doing our thing, living our life, and like playing kickball together. And that's sort of what I kind of think about this. You just forget, and you're just doing your stuff and living your life, even if it's just for a little bit. It feels that way. And so I don't know. I love when that happens. And then we just kind of like take this energy and go back out in the world and just do our thing and just feel maybe a little bit less alone or a little bit more hope. And I know sometimes. Like I ask my patients if they know anyone with epilepsy, and I'm just astounded. It's like 98% of them, every time I ask, these great kids, they're like, no, I don't know anyone, And so I said, well, now, a lot of times I'll say, well, now you do. And I don't know if you guys, like when you share that you have epilepsy with someone, has anyone been a little bit nervous trying to like make that share or kind of let somebody know? You guys are probably like way more like expert level than me, but I'm still like, every time I'm like, all right, I'm gonna say it, I half expect, like if you've seen like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, like the claymation, and I don't know if anybody's like my age and then remembers that, but so Rudolph's got this like fake black nose on, and then it comes off at the reindeer games, and his nose is like, and it's this bright red nose, and everyone just like, their eyes get big and buggy, and they're like, do this swirls, yeah. And they're all like, no, you can't play the reindeer games, right. And Clarice has to leave him alone, and he walks home by himself. Clarice's dad is like, no, Clarice. And so I feel like every little time I like take that step and just try to share, like, yeah, I've got epilepsy. I know what that's like. There's still a little piece of me that's like, oh God, you're gonna get the Rudolph bug eyes, but I do it anyway. And I think we can sometimes find our like inside, I don't know if this makes sense, but inside I feel like we have this little set piece. And it could be set in like 1 or 2 directions, and that's it. And it's like a little tiny shift from like, and it changes all the time, from like disempowered, where you feel like everything's just kind of happening to you and you're stuck and, like that hopeless feeling. And then just a tiny little shift, you can feel it click over to empowered, to where like, okay, like I can sense a little possibility in this thing, or maybe this next interaction or this next thing, I've got some agency in what happens in my life. And I feel like sometimes if I just pay attention to, all right, man, I just like feel like crap today. Like where is that switch set?
I had something in my head and now it's escaping me. Dang it, I hate when that happens. I will say that I think, oh yeah, now I know what I was going to say, sorry. So I keep coming back to hope, and again, hope is something that I know that I certainly don't want to paint a picture that it's like, as my mom would say, sunshine and rainbows, because life is certainly not sunshine and rainbows, right? So I'm not trying to make it seem like, oh, you can do whatever you want. I believe that, but I also know that it's not going to be easy, right? And you have to stop at nothing to keep that feeling going. And it gets hard. I can remember being a kid, and I still, it's been, my last seizure was probably, my brain surgery was August 12th, 2003. My last seizure was like 5 or 6 days post-op. But I still, every single day, think, well, like we kind of talked about this earlier, right? You haven't had a seizure in a long time. I still live with it every day. I still consider that it ain't like I no longer have epilepsy. I know I still have epilepsy. I know that what the statistics would say and what jackasses that are otherwise doctors would say is that hey, you're probably going to seize again in your life and, all these bad things, but I choose not to think about that. I'm constantly reminded of like my journey, and it fuels me and my desire to just keep pushing forward, right? And so I still have those bad moments. I still freak out in my head like, oh man, can I take this Benadryl? Can I take a decongestant? Like, those things used to light me up. We learned very quickly that I could not take like Dayquil, NyQuil, Benadryl. Like I would just seize like crazy, right? And still to this day, I'm 39 years old, and if I get a cold, I'm like, well, buckle up because I'm gonna have the man cold from hell. Like I'm going raw dogging this thing. Like no meds. Like it's so it still lives in me. It's never gonna go away. And the biggest thing you can do is don't let that fire of hope burn out, because that's what drives you to go forward. And if you don't hope, then if you have no hope, then you have no resiliency. And if you have no resiliency, you're just going to spin your wheels and you're going to stay locked in your house. You're going to stay in the shadows, and epilepsy is going to stay in the shadows, right? And we don't need, you need to be empowered to share your story and your journey. I think we know just on the, not to talk too much science, but we even know like on the science side, like there's all these like post ICU studies and stuff. The people that get better are the people that have family and friends and that have an ability and a willingness to still hope for and believe in the process, believe in the therapy, the treatment, believe that there's a path forward and not just stopping because this doctor says, hey, that's all we can do, right? That's why Brad and Candy put this whole thing together. It's to get as many of us in front of people that are willing to help us, because there's plenty of jackass doctors out there that are fine with leaving you on whatever insert medication, regardless of how you feel, and that's just how it's going to be, right? So yeah, I would just really encourage you guys to don't stop at anything. Keep pursuing your passion, your dreams, and keep whatever your seizure burden is, keep that fire to like, no, this can get better. It will get better. You don't know how it's going to happen, just like I don't know how the hell we're going to keep building our foundation and what we're going to accomplish, but we're going to keep moving forward and we're going to do it. We're going to build it as we go. Anyways, I'll stop rambling again.
So good now. Yeah, I mean, I think it is true. Sometimes I feel like I gotta be careful. Like, oh, this is a lot of sunshine. I'm like shooting out of my, tail to everybody. Like, life is hard. We know this, right? Like, there's gonna be pain, there's gonna be hard work, and there's uncertainty. Like, that's just the ball game that we're playing. Like, I don't care, like what kind of celebrity you are. I've lived next to some celebrities, and I know like they're worse off than like most of us, and so those that's like the law of the land, and I just want to give like a quick moment to, is Elena? Well, maybe I can't even do it. This family back here I met, they lost Elena. She's 15, just a year or so ago. They've got her picture there. And I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and of course I did this the second, I heard their story. And I just think as a motorcycle gang or whatever we are, if we can wrap our arms around these riders who are really doing heroic. I asked them, I'm like, how do you move on? And they said just one step. Just a quick story about her. She was at Cincinnati Children's, and they bring heart-shaped pancakes to the people there, and she was had such an impact on everybody. So thinking about every interaction, just something. That she was so thankful and appreciative to the guy that brought her pancakes, that the whole kitchen staff made her a card, signed the card, right? Just because of this girl's heart. And she she wanted to change the world. She wanted to be the first female president. Yeah, she taught. Yeah, she taught that guy about epilepsy. Like, that was sort of like how passionate she was about it. Yeah. Yeah. So I just think, like, Brad and Candy, like, are so quick to feel like family. We kind of have a leg up on a lot of folks here. Like, I think, man, we could be in the same gang, but like, these guys feel like family. Like, if you get a chance to open yourself up, like, I've just been so lucky to sit in that purple chair, and I don't know whose eyes I'm going to meet next, and what story they're going to tell, and like, who knows what's like next in our life. You know, if we're just open to that degree of possibility. And man, it's like, I feel like I'm an English major, so I'm always looking for like metaphors, and I'm like, if I could just walk through life living like I'm in my purple chair, and then it got to be like a really clunky metaphor, because then I'm like carrying around a chair, but like I've got an empty chair next to me, and I'm like just open to like what's next. But I'm so thankful that you guys are here and you shared her story, and I just have a feeling like somehow her life is still going to change the world, right? Where else are you gonna go and see like two like cool, like good hair Southern doctors that cry? Like, you're not gonna find this stuff anywhere else, right?
No, I don't even know what to say now. It's not lost. You know, I speak about hope, and it's scary, right? Because obviously, you know, I'm sitting up here talking positive things and trying to project that energy, and there's a very real side of this. Like, this isn't this is a deadly condition, right? It can be deadly. It can be, and it is that way for some people. And so when you feel like your journey is not fair, is not, but you know, if your journey's not fair, remind yourself of her, right? Because that happens. It's something that I see in our ICU several times a year. I get someone after after a really bad situation, right? And it's a SUDEP situation, and it's horrendous. And I have to deal with that a handful of times a year, and it's never easy. And that's the very real side of it, right? But if anything, I know that's scary, but on the flip side of it, that's a pretty damn good reminder of where you are in your process, and to keep fueling that fire, to keep pressing forward, and, you know, keep pushing for answers and solutions. And there's got to be a better way. It's the 21st century. Like we just got to keep making noise as people with epilepsy. Eventually, enough people are going to pay attention to us. I think that's the key, right? Does anyone have any? I mean, I obviously don't want to put you on the spot, but then like anything that you want to talk about?
I tell you, like, one other guy I met that he couldn't be here. He had some seizures yesterday. But this guy also just like knocked it out of the park. This mom came up, and she was worried about her, and they gave me permission. So his 20-year-old son named Ethan, she said, you know, he's on the spectrum, he's got epilepsy, and just spent so much time isolated in his room. And I've heard that story like time and time again just here this weekend. And it's in the purple chair, and he's a little quiet. He's a little shy to start talking. And once this guy gets going, he's like us up here, man. He just lets loose. He's like, I was binge watching The Walking Dead, and then I love Fast and the Furious, and I've seen all of those. And then I like to work on a team, but I'm really the head honcho. You know, I'm the head honcho. And he's like, I'm not great with math, but like I know every rap. Like I love NWA, Straight Outta Compton. I love rap too. I had a rap notebook in 6th grade. And so I'm sitting there with Ethan, and we're rapping a little Straight Outta Compton. And then he says, and his mom's there watching, and he says, you know, a lot of times on the outside, I try to act like I got it together and I'm doing okay, but on the inside, I'm really not. And his mom's like, she said, I never heard him say that. And I'm thinking like, me too, man. Hell yes, like me too. like all of us, right? Like we're going through this. We got it all together. Look at me. I'm a doctor. Oh my goodness. I'm like, my family's beautiful. My kids are great. And then, I'm like, I was trying to get out of bed and stay out of bed last week, some days. And so, I think for Ethan to kind of just be that real, and still, like today, to reach out, to want to connect, to want to hang in there. I mean, I think that's kind of like, that's the juice for me, is sort of, that's like the lifeiness, right? It's like, okay, yeah, life's not, we're not saying it's easy. Life's hard and painful and tough, but there's sweetness in there, and there's moments of sweetness. It's a face that you see, or eyes that you look into. That sweetness, just hang on to that. And that's all I got to say.
Questions? You want me to tell my family to stand up? Would my family please stand up? Cindy Snelgrove. And then my Aunt Diane's back there. Aunt Diane, stand up. She was a nurse, and she was always like coming to all their doctor's appointments. And then my dad.
You gotta be loud. They gotta hear us over there.
He was the psychopath that would. I'm just kidding, Dad. But but my dad was very determined that I was going to be quote unquote normal, right? So that entailed like watching me have a seizure with my all-star team when we're at the lower state championship, and then waiting about 30 minutes for my Todd's paralysis to resolve, so then we could all head to the ballpark and get ready for our game that afternoon. But that's resiliency, and that's like one of the things I'm very thankful for. And then my beautiful wife is over here, Emily. And then my equally beautiful mother-in-law is somewhere over here. I brought the whole gang from South Carolina. And then my brother Drew Dixon in the back. Like that's my buddy. But thank you for letting us just share our story with you. And I know it's rambling in nature and stuff, but that's kind of how all of our stories are, right? And the cool thing is, we were talking about this, we were like, how many times have you told your story? Like I said earlier, my mom has been making me say this stuff since I was 12 years old. It's like I used to like write it down on page, but you're all going to have that story, and it's important for you to tell your story because it's your story. It's what we're doing here on life. That's what we're here for, and everybody's journey is different. And don't be ashamed of your journey. Just share it. Yeah.
Questions? You had a question, right?
Well, and I think that's like the problem, right?
I'm going to make you talk in the microphone.
Yeah. No, it's hard to find community because there's a lot of kids, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of support, which they need. But I think adults, it's very lonely.
Yeah. What can we do? How can we fix that? No, it's all of our jobs, right? Does any adults with epilepsy here? Have you figured? Yeah. Okay. There's a couple of us. Right. Have you figured out? Is there a way that like communities worked well for you, or things that you found? Okay. Here. Take it.
It's called the Epilepsy Support Group, and it meets like I think it's every Friday, at least once a month, end of the month, and my memory sucks, so it's hard for me to remember where they're located. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
You guys can. Anybody? Yeah. Anything else that's been helpful for people? Yeah. Oh, here. I'm going here and then I'm going there.
I just want to say that that as a mother, I'm a lot like your mother, very, very similar, where I do not take no as an answer. I do not accept the no, you can't. Like, yes, my kid not only absolutely can, but she will, and I'll make sure she will. A lot of And I just want to say, as families, we are the biggest advocates, and I went to one of the other doctors that you don't want to eat lunch with. I went and saw him. He was a neurosurgeon, and he's working on genetics, and he's devoted his entire career working on the genetics of epilepsy and how it develops over a period of time. And he said that one of his goals by the end of his career is to put himself out of business, to be able to treat epilepsy not invasively at all, and that they are working on that right now. So, one, there's a lot of hope, and two, it might very well be in our children's future, and in your future if you're an adult. So, yes, you can.
Thank you. I love meeting like these. Some of the moms are just amazing. I think, okay, for you, I want make sure you connect with us, right? Because like we're all right. Y'all, okay, whatever. Don't connect with us. You don't have to.
As a 19-year-old about to enter her 20s, I can vouch that I would love to talk to adults with epilepsy, because being diagnosed at 14 and about to enter my 20s, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. I've got my parents and my support system, but we don't know what the heck's going on either. Like, we're just doing our best. And so, please, like, if you're an adult with epilepsy, please come talk to me, because my parents and I, we will talk to you. I may not know as much as you, and I might be way more mature. But I would love to talk to you guys, and like my family and I, we've been through it, and I know a lot of you guys have too, and yeah, I mean, I've connected with people younger than myself and older than myself, and so I don't think there's a specific age range that you have to stay in to connect.
And yeah, and I think even if like, I don't know if somebody's got a piece of paper or some way like we could just collect like, hey, we're like a little mini family in here today. Like we could keep in touch. Like I'm not good at technology because I was born in the 70s, but there's ways that we could do that. Yeah, you could.
So up until about 6 years ago, I didn't really share that I had epilepsy. And then I received a grant in Illinois to provide outreach and services. So I didn't realize my boss had contacted the local newspaper and radio, and there it was. I had to kind of out myself. And the first person who called me was a lady from my town who shares the same last name and the same birthday with me that I didn't know. And she's in her 70s, and she is exactly what I needed all my life that I never had as your age. So I would be happy to speak with you. So.
And you can talk to me and Dan, but apparently I don't know.
She was first.
Who's first? This is fun. I could do this.
I just had a question and advice, because last year my daughter, I ended up pulling her out of school because there are a lot of kids out there that are extremely cruel, and they actually make fun of her and laugh at her while she has a seizure. So I was just kind of wondering what, like, your advice you would give her. She's 13 and she's been battling epilepsy since she was 6, and it really upsets her.
So I was always very self-conscious of my epilepsy. It's partly because my mother she pushed Medical University of South Carolina to put a vagus nerve stimulator in her 12-year-old son, right, Mom? Wasn't even FDA approved. We had to do terrible things to actually scrounge up the cash to make it happen, right? But the issue with that was every time I spoke, my voice would go hoarse. Every 2 minutes for 30 seconds. And that was brutal, because I initially went to a private school, and my seizures got to the point I couldn't keep up with the coursework. So I don't like to say I flunked out, but I failed out. I re-enrolled in 9th grade at a 3A public school, and I wasn't in the sexy AAP, AP classes like Drew Dixon back there. I was in these massive classes, just your classic big public school classes, and I was terrified. But eventually I realized, you know what? Like, again, it was like overcoming that fear of sharing my story. And F whoever doesn't care, and F the people that are which bullies are literally the worst thing on earth. There's nothing worse than, well, there's maybe a couple things, but a bully is pretty damn terrible, right? Always, because it's always, you want to retaliate. I would always want to retaliate physically, which is frowned upon in school. So.
You can tell he's the adult neurologist. I'm just thinking of like telling my patients, like, yeah, just F the bullies, we gotta retaliate.
Well, I'm just keeping it real. Like that's how it is, right? It's if you're in, but I think when you get to that mental place and it's not easy, but you know what? Their opinion doesn't reflect what I'm living and what I'm dealing with, and you still control your own destiny, and you'll eventually learn to block out the noise like that, because that kind of energy is what drains you, right? It's already a big enough drain being diagnosed with epilepsy, right? Dealing with the meds, dealing with the fact you're a teenager. When's the last time you had a seizure? Oh shit, did I take my medicine last night? I used to have my mom freaking call the school nurse to make sure I had taken my medicine, right? Like, it's like you're dealing with enough on your plate. And it's easy for me to say, don't worry about the kids that are going to give you a hard time. But really, that's the gift of epilepsy as a kid, is because it forces you to become very mature at a young age. Like, you become wiser beyond your years because you've been through some shit. And that's okay. But just rise above it. Don't stoop to their level. Try to educate. And if they don't want to be educated and learn from you, F them. How's that for doctor advice?
Yeah, come here.
Raise your hand if you're a kid or an adult that has epilepsy. Who did you ever get bullied as a kid? Who, like... like, people that doesn't have epilepsy, they need to imagine what all of us go through. Like the medication, even the little absons or the big seizures, like, we even get tired, like, even from the little ones. Like, even if they're little ones. Like...
I think you have a new speaker for next year. That's amazing. And then, like, it's so hard just being a teen. I've got a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old. It's just so, like, impossibly hard anyway. I think, like, sometimes even if you could just find, like, one semi-friend or someone that understands, and just sort of, like, somebody to be there, or, like, got a great mom, and that's more than a lot of us, could say.
I wanted to say my daughter lives in Cincinnati also. We live in Pennsylvania, but I switched her from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati because Pittsburgh was right.
Anybody? Okay, here we go.
My question is about how you guys... So my question is about how you guys navigated medical school, because there's already stressors in medical school. Were you able to stay seizure-free, or for someone who has epilepsy and is interested in med school, what tips do you have?
I was able to stay seizure-free. I was, like, so nervous so much of the time. I'd had, like, maybe some little, like, we had 30-hour shifts back then, so I just remember, like hallucinating driving home some mornings after like 30 hours straight, or I would have like a little bit of myoclonus, and So I was just nervous like a lot of the time, but I was fortunate I didn't have any seizures. Now, one of my friends was at the same program like a decade before. This is like a little inside baseball. They had a seizure during neurology residency, and the head of neurology wouldn't let them examine patients for years afterwards because, well, they may have a seizure during that. And so there's a little bit of like, it's amazing that we talk about stigma. I can tell you stories of like, I had like a pediatric epilepsy doctor that I worked with, saw a picture on my computer of a friend of mine that had died from SUDEP. This guy was, I went to college with him. He was a drama teacher in New York. And my colleague, who was a pediatric epilepsy specialist, he looked at my friend's picture and said, are you sure he had epilepsy? Like, he looks too high functioning to me. This guy's like a top-notch pediatric epilepsy specialist. And I was like, oh, shit, dude, does he know? He doesn't know. Like, does he know? Like, I don't know. What do I look like? Yeah. But anyway, so I was fortunate. I was just really careful.
Yeah, I think the challenge of medical school is it's designed not to be easy, just inherently, and you're going to push yourself to the max. I was definitely, I guess I'd been almost 10 years seizure-free going into medical school, and I was like very nervous, and I did okay with that. I definitely had spells, as I've said to him, where it's like, I love saying that, yeah, I've been 20 years seizure-free, but in retrospect, I know that I've definitely had probably a handful of breakthrough seizures. One of them happened, which really in the training part during residency when I was a neurology intern. So I was on night float, supremely sleep deprived. I would fall asleep and wake up with like the myoclonic jerks. And I had a really awful sleep paralysis episode. Has anyone ever had that before? So I had a sleep paralysis episode that was very familiar to me because it was similar to what my own seizures were like that I remembered when I was younger. I would wake up out of my sleep, feel like I couldn't move, and then I would start to go into the seizure. Well, this had happened a couple of times, and being a neurology resident, I emailed my chair. Then I had a 6-hour EEG done, a 3T MRI done. My chief at the time that I was on night flow with, this is terrible. This just shows you how doctors in training are. I had him call downstairs to the pharmacy, and I started taking Keppra. I took an oral bolus that night as well, like just going rogue. But everything ended up being okay. But there are going to be times and points where it's challenging. The biggest challenge for me was like cognitively, because I felt like I was never, and I still have imposter syndrome. I feel like the only reason why I got into med school is because I just beat on the door long enough, and they finally let me in. But I still struggle with imposter syndrome. I feel like I don't belong, and I constantly, just in the depths of my soul, I worry like, man, this could happen again. What if I had another seizure again? But at the same time, so many people, some of my colleagues, I don't go around singing it from the rooftops, but whenever there's an opportunity to share my journey, or the fact that I had seizures, or the fact that I had a hemicrania and my skull wasn't on my head for a month and a half, like I've lived it, so I can relate to a lot of my patients. And I think that's what's kind of carried me through. Yeah.
And I think for somebody, I know your daughter's thinking about medicine, and I know, we talked to another guy today that is in college, he's thinking about going to med school. He's got epilepsy, so we're trying to talk him into medicine. This guy's also like a musician. He plays like jazz drums. Drew's trying to convince him to just not go to med school and just like go all out and like start playing music. But so there's lots of us. Like, this is what I realized. Like, there's lots of doctors with epilepsy. They're just kind of like they're just high now, right? And so you can certainly do it. There's ways to do it. Yeah.
And we shouldn't be hiding out, right?
Right.
We should be sharing, because that's what we told them, right? That's going to be your superpower, because you have an advantage over someone because you're living everything that your patients are going to do, regardless of what their diagnosis is. The trips to the doctor's office, the pharmacy, the not knowing what the hell's going on, dealing with jackass doctors, dealing with the insurance companies, right?
Forgetting your medicine. Like, I know last week I was taking antibiotics, and then for some reason I wasn't paying attention, and I just took like a double dose of the old Depakote, and I was like, oh boy, that's gonna feel good about like noon today, like how and so like I'm like the worst. Like, it's midnight. And of course I'm out of my meds, and I've got to like find a 24-hour pharmacy like across the border because I'm in Niagara Falls, like just doing idiot stuff like that. So you cannot understand. So when you get those phone calls like, oh, I need a refill, like I'm not yelling at you because I'm like, yeah, I'm that guy that's like, sorry, I know I waited too late.
My question for you is I'm picking up a theme of what you're talking about right now and what some others have said is in your careers when you're an adult, like my son right here, you have to lie. When they talk about seizures, you get a driver's license, you lie. You get a job, you don't mention that you have epilepsy. And if you do, you don't get hired, you get fired, you get laid off. That appears to be the reality of what's happening right now. How do you react to where you have enough glitches, like my son does, that you can't hide?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's organizations, and we look at some of the like ADA laws and stuff like that, where you can do it. But like again, like I know people that have had to like sue hospitals because of how they've been treated or fired for right. So that doesn't help, right? People don't love you when you do that. So there's like, I don't have a great answer, and this is one that I hope you have.
No mistake about it, like the system is horrendously broken, right? I think everybody can agree with that. Living in healthcare, part of the reason why I ended up in the ICU is because I felt that the system was broken. And not just the system, the healthcare system, but like what you're saying, you disempower people and they can't go on to have a livelihood because they have this label. And like you said, so much about it is, people, you said it yourself. You drove how many weeks after? Right, it's like you have to lie, right? And so and I don't know what the answer to that is. Yeah. Right.
You're out of school. Right now, the system requires you to lie. He hates that.
Yeah.
I don't like it either.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
Any way around.
If anybody's got an
Lie.
answer, find this guy, get him.
Yeah.
All of us. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Keep working, man. Don't give up. Don't stop.
What I'm hoping to do is develop an individual career plan, an ICP for adults.
That's genius. Beautiful.
It's got a long ways to go. I can't do it by myself. I need help.
You got a whole
Anybody,
family of people.
if anybody's interested in something like that, I think that's a wonderful idea. Yes. Okay. Okay. Smoke them if you got them, guys. Yes. I just want to keep doing this until.
I think a lot of people in the room today have mentioned just like the issue of stigma being so limiting for families and people living with epilepsy. What does everyone think can be done to help fight stigma and stigma, kind of going beyond, everyone here understands, right? But then you go out into the real world and a lot of people have never heard of epilepsy. So what does everybody think can be done as a collective community to fight stigma?
This is like a silly idea that I've had. Like I got to know a guy that's he's like Mick Fleetwood, Fleetwood Mac. He's like his nephew. He's a cool guy. And anyway, long story. But so he makes commercials right out here in LA. And I'm like, someone was telling me today, there's commercials for everything. I'm like, I don't know if it's just me, but there's so much like mild to moderate plaque psoriasis commercials. I was like, do they know? Like, how did they know? Like, it was in the hotel. But so like, even just like a PSA to be like, this is what epilepsy looks like. Like, so that people would see, like, there's a lot of companies, a lot of drug companies, there's a lot of money running around. Like, why can't we just make like a little like PSA to get out there to like, hey guys, I mean, she's like, there's AIDS commercial, there's everything, but like nobody knows, like we, like we're always sort of like, we don't get the love in epilepsy. Yeah, we're so good at grumbling in epilepsy, like we don't get anything, but it's really true, like, right? So, for me, I think like that's something that I would love to work on, just to be like faces of epilepsy and just be like, you've got like doc, like in the ICU, you've got, people jamming. There's so much that we're all doing. And then folks saw that, oh, that's what epilepsy looks like. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think like sharing your story.
Yeah.
That's how you break down the stigma, right? Is you got to share your journey and your story. And I mean, so that responsibility falls on all of us, right? I've been talking about it, but now having to do it through social media, it's like terrifying, right? A lot of my coworkers know about it, but it still makes me nervous because it's vulnerable. Like, it's like very vulnerable to share someone what, this diagnosis is and what it means and dealing with the stigma. But the reason why there's a stigma there is because for so long patients felt like they couldn't talk about it. And so that's why I think you have enough on your plate as it is with someone with epilepsy, but that's why it's so important to talk about it, because that's the only way that the stigma is going to get changed. Either that or Lil Wayne will finally come out and say he has epilepsy.
Right, we can do better than Lil Wayne. I love him, but we can do better.
I wasn't expecting.
Nobody sexy has had epilepsy.
Um,
Right. Or think about Ted Kennedy. One of the Ted Kennedy had a brain tumor, but he had horrendous epilepsy from his brain, and not once was that ever mentioned. That was literally what obviously he had a brain tumor, but the most horrendous part of his journey was the epilepsy that he had. He never heard once anything about it, and he lived for years with that brain. Anyways, I don't know what else we can do other than.
I wasn't expecting to talk, but just hearing about this stigma, and our daughter was just diagnosed about 3 or 4 months ago, so we're kind of new to this journey. This has been an incredible experience. But in the process of all of this, prior to the diagnosis, she was trying to be recruited for her sport in college. And so, of course, after the diagnosis, we went through a lot of mental health issues, but she still went for it. She just committed about a month ago to a university. She made it. And but what was really exciting, we traveled across the country. We weren't going to say anything because of stigma, because we'd talked to many athletes who had played her sport, had gotten recruited for college, had a seizure, lacrosse. And they got practice, and their coach never played them again. And I thought, this really boils down, for me, I'm a health educator, so for the background, I'm like, this boils down to education for me. The more people we talk to, the more we share, the more we educate them about epilepsy, about what can happen, about that it's not as horrible as people seem to think that it is and has that stigma. So we went to the university, and we're sitting at the appointment, and we had agreed not to tell the coach that she had epilepsy. I thought, you're going to have to give your mom some time because I'm afraid to say anything. I don't want anything to happen. And another coach that my daughter had worked with had shared it with the coach at the university. And so she sat down with us and was like, so, Maddie has epilepsy. And I was like my heart jumped out of my, and I was thinking, oh, here it comes, right? And she said, well, how can we support her? So I think that once we get to that point of education, we might be able to turn this around. So that's all. I just wanted to say.
Using your platform is
so.
That's going to be your job on top of being a collegiate level lacrosse player, right? But you got to, you have a platform to share with your teammates, and that's a big responsibility, but that's important. And you got to share that with your team and with your people,
Other athletes, because when I was diagnosed, I thought it was all going to end. I was talking to the University of Tampa that just won the national championship, and I thought they're not going to take someone like me, but it was that coach that made it very clear that I was wanted despite what I was going through, and I want to show other people they can do it too.
Where are you going to college?
That's so awesome. I'm so selfish because I'm like a talent scout. I'm like, okay, I can just see you on the commercial, you like the public service, just slapping that thing. But it's amazing. And again, you'll know when you're ready and how you want to share and all that. You'll know, but you're not alone. You got all these quirky cast of characters here with you. Make sure don't leave. Get our email, get our something so when you're out there you can stay in touch. And we'll cheer you on, okay? Yeah. It's because if not, and you guys know, it's a lonely slog of it, right? So you're not alone.
Yes, my high school basketball coach refused to play me after I had my brain surgery. And we were really good, and I was not terrible. And, I was once really good, recruited and stuff like that, and that was devastating because I had an ignorant coach that just stuck his head in the sand.
I just want to clarify, did you say Lewis University in Illinois? You're an hour from me. So if you need anything, I'm an hour away.
Did that help? Does that sort of answer? I mean, there's so much that we can do. There's a lot, but and it could feel overwhelming sometimes. But anybody else with anything? Or you guys are like, get us out of here, please. We love you. Yes, 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 you can.
I like it. So, just really quick, I had circled your talk in our little brochure before we even met yesterday. And then when we came, I didn't even know that it was you that was talking. I'm like, I just really want to go to this. So walking in and seeing it was you was just it was meant to happen. But I think along with finding a cure and finding our voice, and I said, helping to make legislators also know that there needs to be laws in place, there needs to be protections for people with epilepsy, because a lot of epilepsy is quiet and it falls through the cracks. And our daughter, Elena, she drowned in her high school swimming class in PE when she had a seizure action plan and she had a 504 in place. So those are things that you do all of those things and you think your child is safe, and I'm the same mom. And so that's another thing. And I didn't want to hijack the talk, but but I also want to Elena always signed her emails, the end of her emails, and as a high school freshman, they have to come up with a phrase, and hers was, "Don't let yesterday change the way that you see tomorrow." And I think that's just a great thing to leave with today, that don't let yesterday change the way that you see tomorrow, especially for you.
We're going to have business cards next.